Hey y'all, it's Kim. So this will be hour three, I guess, of the Hillary Clinton deposition about her ties kind of to Epstein, if there are any. Anyway, let me set a timer, and that way we can just cut it off maybe after the hour. It may go over a little bit, but we'll do our best. Anyway, let's go ahead and let her play, and let's keep rolling with it. Anyway, let's listen to her.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Let me also just add one thing. You've probably also read reporting that Secretary Lutnick was pretty
Hold on. It does that about every hour or so.
pretty open in an interview about not having spoken to Mr. Epstein or interacted with him after 2005. And then we go on to learn that Secretary Lutnick not only went to the island, there were visits, they went into possible business together, communicated with his wife. So there were numerous interactions that happened after that interview. We believe that Secretary Lutnick should be in front of this committee answering questions, especially when he's choosing to essentially lie about his interactions with Mr. Epstein. Would you agree that Secretary Lutnick should come in to testify?
I think everyone that the committee sees playing a prominent role in the files should be deposed. That is your job. Your job is to try to get to the truth as best as you can determine it. And that should be the guiding principle, it seems to me, as to who you ask to come before you.
Thank you.
Hello, Congressman.
Hello. Thank you, Secretary, for being here today. I'm going to ask you a few questions that might be a little redundant.
That's okay.
Just to get on the record.
Yeah, of course.
Am I correct that you did not know at any point before Jeffrey Epstein's crimes became public that Epstein committed or facilitated sexual abuse of minors and young women?
That is correct.
And prior to Epstein's crimes becoming public, were you ever warned not to associate with him?
Not that I recall.
And you did not know at any point before Maxwell's crimes became public that she committed or facilitated sexual abuse of minors or young women?
That is correct.
And did anyone ever raise concerns to you about Miss Maxwell or warn you not to associate with her?
Not that I recall.
Thank you. And you served as First Lady and U.S. Senator and Secretary of State. And so you met a lot of other heads of state, foreign dignitaries. And so at any point, did Jeffrey Epstein or Billy Maxwell's names come up?
Not that I recall.
And you mentioned you did a lot of work on human trafficking. Could you talk a little bit more about that? And then also, I would love to know if Jeffrey Epstein or Billy Maxwell's names ever came up.
No, I can tell you that those names never came up, as I said, prior to their crimes becoming public. I don't think people knew. Or if they did know, they were not sharing that. Or if they did share it with the FBI or the Justice Department, the investigations never went anywhere. So I don't know that anybody would have ever raised those names. And I don't know that anybody knew to even look into it. You know, as I said, the whole question of human trafficking, sexual slavery, forced labor, domestic violence, for the longest time were not even considered crimes. And it took a lot of effort on the part of many, many courageous people around the world to raise the visibility of these crimes and to actually change criminal law in many countries. You know, when I spoke in 1995 at the UN World Conference on Women in Beijing, that was one of the issues everyone was struggling with. Domestic violence was considered cultural, not criminal. Sexual slavery was just something that happened. You know, young women were forced into prostitution. All of this was certainly known and was something that had gone on for, you know, centuries, thousands of years. But there became finally enough outrage and organizational impetus to begin to try to change that. And that's what I worked on when I was First Lady, because I really became aware as I traveled to Asia and Africa, even Eastern Europe, particularly after the fall of the Soviet Union, what a big criminal network was operating around the world to traffic people. And obviously we're here focusing on what happened to, girls and women with being sexually abused, but it's also true that people were forced into labor in mines and fishing boats. I mean, this was a phenomenon that finally was getting attention. And we worked very hard to raise visibility. I mentioned the law that was finally passed in our country in 2000. There was also something called the Palermo Protocol, where nations came together to pledge themselves to change laws, to implement enforcement against trafficking. So it's been a long struggle, but we've tried to focus on preventing it, prosecuting it, and protecting the survivors. And we've made progress, but obviously we're here today talking about crimes that still are happening even in our own country.
I know the public wants names to be named, and I know this is a difficult question for you given your lack of a relationship with Epstein or Maxwell, but are there any names that you think we should be talking to at this point that haven't been out there already?
I don't know any more than you do as to what's being exposed in the files. I saw where Congressman Massey stood on the floor the other day and said that he named 3 people, as I recall, that should be investigated. But there's a long list of people who may, even if they did not do something themselves wrong, because of their association with Epstein, might have credible information for your committee.
And final question, you've expressed a desire for this hearing to be public. I just love to hear sort of an explanation for why.
Look, I think sunlight is the best disinfectant. I think as much as we can do in public, we should do. And I've testified before Congress many times before you were there. And it was always in public. I mean, that's what we did. I testified and I was on the other side of the table asking questions in public, except for something that was classified that couldn't be in public. What we did was in the sunlight, in front of the press, because people, namely our constituents, deserve to know what we are finding out and to go along with us, with few exceptions, to understand, what the Congress is doing. So I believe for a long time, I think we should be testifying in public, and I think it would benefit this committee for people to see that you're actually doing things, and especially if you call people who have some credible information for you, that you are committed, regardless of the cover-up in the Justice Department or whatever directions the DOJ is getting from the White House, you are determined to find out the truth.
Thank you.
And how many administrations? I think there's 5 that this has been going on with.
Hello, Congressman.
Secretary, how are you?
I'm okay.
First and foremost, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Secondly, as an attorney, I know sometimes things are done differently in DC, but when an agreement is made and our word is given, it should be kept.
I agree with that.
And first and foremost, to get into the line of questioning that I had, on November 12th of last year, Oversight Committee Democrats released emails that were obtained from the estate of Jeffrey Epstein. In one email from 2011, Epstein said to Ghislaine Maxwell that President Trump was, quote, that dog that hasn't barked.
Oh, please.
End of quote. And that an unnamed victim, quote, spent hours at my house with him. End of quote. In another email from 2019, Epstein wrote that, quote, of course, he, referring to President Trump,
knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop. 2 days later, President Trump directed Attorney General Pam Bondi to investigate President Clinton and other prominent Democrats in order to distract from his own close ties to Jeffrey Epstein. I'll mark as Minority Exhibit B a true social post from Donald Trump dated November 14th, 2025. And I think you have that now. As you can see, President Trump's post refers to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes against young girls and women as the Epstein hoax, end of quote. His post also completely ignores several other high-profile individuals, including Republicans and allies of President Trump, who are known to have had relationships with Epstein. In fact, the Epstein files contain numerous officials in the current and previous Trump administrations with connections to Jeffrey Epstein, including, but I'm not sure limited to, Howard Lutnick, RFK Jr., Steve Bannon, Elon Musk, Tom Barrack, Kevin Warsh, and Mehmet Oz, to name a few. Secretary Clinton, to your knowledge, has the Trump administration done anything at all to investigate these other individuals with ties to Epstein?
How the hell would she know?
Congressman, I know of nothing, just reading the press. I obviously have no inside information that there has been any effort whatsoever to investigate the names that you just mentioned or any others who might have credible information about Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. And I think that's where this committee comes in. You are not beholden to the Justice Department. You have an independent Article I jurisdiction. You are the co-equal branch of government, and you have the responsibility to pursue what the Justice Department apparently is failing to pursue. The other point I would make is, having observed President Trump.
Let's just say, let's back up, because remember yesterday, I think it was, she said she couldn't speculate on anything that Bill Clinton was doing with regard to massages, but now she can speculate on all these other people being connected to Epstein and having, I mean, yes, they should be investigated. I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but now she's given all this grandstanding, filibustering, whatever you want to call it, about the administration and the members that they just named. I mean, so you can't speculate on your husband, but you can sure as hell rail against the current administration. But remember, there's been 5. So Clinton, Bush Jr., Obama, Trump, Biden, now Trump again. So yeah. I mean, what the hell are we doing here? She says she can't speculate about her own husband, but she can sure sit here and say all these other people's names. Whatever. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. But I know the whole point is these minority questions are Democrats, asking her these softball things so that she can get on here and just spill her guts about everything she thinks, which would still be speculating.
Close and personal for a number of years now since I ran against him. He has a tell. He has a behavioral tell. Whenever he is worried about being found out himself, he accuses somebody else of doing what he actually has done. And it's just a pattern.
That's the Democrat way, the projection. Come on. If you notice, that's what they do, but whatever. Okay.
With him. So it's no surprise to me that all of a sudden, what he promised in his campaign to reveal,
he didn't
everything about the files. And then when his people began looking in the files and realized how potentially incriminating they were of him, all of a sudden, that was no longer the focus. It was blaming Democrats, talking about a hoax, saying move on, there's nothing to see here. That is a typical pattern of President Trump's behavior, which speaks louder than all the words that he speaks and all of the true social posts that he makes. He clearly knows what he did. He knows what others did, because remember, one of the emails that has come out recently is he called the police chief of Palm Beach at the time Epstein was arrested, according to reporting, to say, I'm so glad you got him. I'm so glad you're stopping him. Well, how would he know that? How would he know that? So there is so much to be uncovered here rather than being covered up. And it really, in addition to the specific information that could be gotten and the accountability that could be achieved, it would restore trust. You know, the American people are not dumb. They're watching this, they're seeing this, they're following this. And it's just one more example of, you know, us not doing the kind of work that would build trust in finding out, you know, the truth, not just for the victims and survivors, but for the American public.
I just have a couple quick questions. Howard Lutnick recently went so far as to lie about his close connections with Jeffrey Epstein, but the truth came out with the release of the files. Secretary Clinton, is Howard Lutnick still employed as the Secretary of Commerce in the Trump administration?
So far as I know.
Secretary Clinton, in your opinion, why has Donald Trump ignored these other prominent figures who had close ties to Epstein?
I can't speculate on that, Congressman. I think it's a worthwhile question to ask, and I think it certainly should be asked by this committee.
And lastly, in light of everything, not just what I think was an embarrassing leak earlier, do you believe your deposition today is a good faith exercise?
I can't conclude that. I think all the information, such as it is, that I have could have been delivered in a sworn statement, could have been delivered in written interrogatories. So I'm not going to speculate about the committee's intentions here. But, you know, a former member of this committee, someone with whom I doubt I have very much in common, Marjorie Taylor Greene, said that Trump put pressure on Bondi not to release the files. And if I recall, she was one of the votes for the Transparency Act, and she and others, including other members of this committee, were hauled into the White House and taken to the woodshed. And so I believe she may be a source of information about, you know, her own experience, demonstrating clearly that this White House does not want the Justice Department to release the files that might in any way incriminate President Trump.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Thank you so much for being here, Madam Secretary. Some of this was briefly touched upon, but as you know, there is wide speculation among the public that Jeffrey Epstein may have been affiliated with domestic intelligence agencies and services. Alex Acosta, for example, Secretary of Labor in the first Trump administration, allegedly said that Epstein, quote, belonged to intelligence, end quote. We know that Acosta has denied the statement, but it nonetheless raises questions about Epstein. You obviously served in a variety of highly sensitive positions, allowing you to access some of our nation's most sensitive and secretive information. Either during or after your time in government, were you ever made aware of Jeffrey Epstein having any kind of relationship directly or indirectly with a United States intelligence agency or service like the CIA?
I was not, but obviously I served in the Senate and don't recall anything like that ever being presented. I was on the Armed Services Committee, so perhaps there might have been a mention if there was any relevance. And in the State Department, I don't recall any information like that at all.
And were you ever made aware of Ghislaine Maxwell having any kind of relationship with an intelligence agency or service?
I was not.
Thank you. Now, during the committee's deposition of former Attorney General Bill Barr, he indicated that, quote, many American businessmen who have foreign contacts sometimes will talk to intelligence agencies and provide information to them. Are you aware of Jeffrey Epstein having these less formal interactions with the CIA or any other domestic intelligence?
I'm not aware of any intelligence connections of Jeffrey Epstein at all.
And that applies to foreign intelligence?
Yes, it does.
Okay. I want to move to.
But I do think, Congresswoman, as I said earlier, your questions are well taken. There are so many threads of this investigation that need to be followed. You are talking about the intelligence. We have talked about the sexual abuses. And we also should be following the money. One of my former colleagues, Senator Wyden, is trying to get out of the Treasury Department records about Jeffrey Epstein's financial transactions. The Congress should, and this committee certainly should, subpoena the Treasury Secretary for the information that Senator Wyden has compiled. In my experience in the Senate, Senator Wyden is a thoughtful, careful investigator. If he says there's something there, I would take it to the bank. And so follow the money, follow these foreign involvement, intelligence potential, whether they're true or not, I don't know. And of course, follow whatever leads you can get out of the emails and other information that are being put forth by either DOJ or the Epstein estate or anybody else on, the crimes that he committed.
Thank you. That brings us to the issue of transparency, which is related to what you just said. You and President Clinton have been very clear about your desire to testify publicly before this committee. In fact, on February 5th, 2026, you posted on social media, quote, "If you want this fight at Rep. James Comer, let's have it in public." You love to talk about transparency. There is nothing more transparent than a public hearing, cameras on. Secretary Clinton, why is it important for you to testify before this committee in a public setting?
Well, first of all, I believe in public testimony. I believe that the public has a right to know what its elected members of Congress are investigating and legislating. Having served for 8 years, I think it is useful as a member to do a hearing in public because you're going to learn things by the coverage of it, by the response that you get from people. This hearing, if it were in public, maybe your question about intelligence, maybe somebody watching it would have said, "Oh my gosh, I just remembered having a conversation with Foreign Minister X or Prime Minister Y, and that person mentioned Jeffrey Epstein." Most people are not going to look at the video, they're not going to read the transcript, but they will follow a live public hearing. So I think it actually enhances the work that those of us who've been privileged to serve are doing and can do. So to me, it is just an absolute prerequisite for doing the kind of legislative and investigative work as effectively as possible by doing it in public.
And did you know that you would be photographed today?
No.
And is that at all part of what you had understood about the terms of the agreement for today's deposition?
Well, I will confess that I had some concerns about whether the majority on the committee would treat me fairly and would, fairly convey what I say and what I did and how I looked and how I responded. So yes, I did have a concern. And when we learned about the photos being taken, not by a staff member, but by a member, it was shocking and very disappointing. So if it were in public, we wouldn't have that debate. Everybody could see the same thing that the Congresswoman saw. I'm sitting here, sometimes I'm smiling, sometimes I'm frowning, sometimes I look good, sometimes I don't. That's all in public. Everybody can have the same view rather than, an angled photo and all the rest of it. So it was disappointing, and I regret that it happened and it violated your rules, but that's not the real concern I have. The real concern is get busy. Focus on the people that have something to tell you, that can tell you about intelligence, money, and crimes, and get them before you, and whenever possible, do it in public.
And finally, do you think that Donald Trump should be deposed by this committee?
Absolutely. I was a lawyer, and as a lawyer, you would look for pattern and practice. If you were deposing a witness in a case that you were trying, if you were in court, what did you know about this person? What you knew could influence how you question that person, how you tried the case. Donald Trump has been held civilly liable for sexual assault by a jury of his peers. 9 members of a jury found him liable in the sexual assault of E. Jean Carroll. That is behavior. That fits a pattern if one were looking for a pattern. He has also been convicted on 34 felony counts for attempting to hide his relationship with an escort and then to commit business fraud to prevent it from becoming public in the 2016 campaign, which was ultimately election interference. So if I were running the committee or I were involved in this investigation, I would be looking for people who maybe had some prior conduct that might be relevant to either money or crimes. And yes, I think that it would be in keeping with the scope of the investigation of this committee to set up a deposition with President Trump. I know he's been deposed many, many, many times. He's taken the Fifth Amendment many, many hundreds of times. So I'm not saying you're going to get a lot of information. But given what's in the files and given past and prior conduct, he would be on my witness list.
Thank you.
We can go off the record.
And did you notice how long they let her talk? But whenever the majority is asking questions and trying to depose her or whatever, she doesn't do all this extra talking. It's only when the minority wants to do it. It's just crazy. I don't know.
All right, we'll go back on the record. It is 2:49 p.m. I believe Chairman Comer has something he would like to say.
Yes, and thank you, Madam Secretary, and we appreciate what you said in the last round of questioning. I want to be very clear. This committee is taking this investigation very seriously. We are following the money. We have a history of doing that over the past 2 years. I wrote the Treasury Department requesting suspicious activity reports related to Jeffrey Epstein. Treasury has been in full compliance, and our staff has spent untold hours reviewing those documents. I know the minority staff have also reviewed those documents. Anytime we subpoena anything, both sides get it. Based on the suspicious activity reports, I then issued subpoenas to 2 banks, Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan. The banks, those 2 banks are also in compliance and continue to produce thousands of pages of records. And I will say this before I turn it over to Representative Mace. This investigation is made very difficult when witnesses drag out negotiations for more than 6 months and violate their duly issued subpoenas. So that's one reason when we're dealing with very powerful people that have the best attorneys out there, it's very difficult when it takes 6 months to get witnesses in. So I just wanted to mention that. I'll yield to Ms. Mace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, thank you for returning this afternoon. Secretary Clinton, is your husband someone the committee should investigate?
And my husband will be here tomorrow. You'll have a chance to ask him questions.
So my question is your husband someone this committee should investigate?
Ask and answer.
Apparently you are. You've subpoenaed him. He's going to be here tomorrow.
In your testimony before the break, you discussed why you believe President Trump should testify before our committee due to a, quote, pattern of behavior, end quote. You testified that a pattern of behavior warrants accountability. So I want to make sure I understand your standard correctly. The pattern of behavior you described includes being held civilly liable, indictments, sexually deviant behavior, correct?
Yes.
In 1998, your husband was found civilly liable for sexual misconduct with Paula Jones and settled for $850,000. Is that correct?
Yes.
By your standard of pattern of behavior, should your husband testify before this committee?
He is testifying tomorrow.
On December 19th, 1998, President Clinton was impeached on charges of perjury and obstruction of justice, which directly related to his extramarital affair with Monica Lewinsky. Is that correct?
Yes.
And your husband was impeached for perjury related to sexual behavior, correct?
I didn't understand what you said.
Your husband was impeached for perjury related to sexual behavior, his sexual behavior.
He was impeached for several reasons, and then was acquitted in the Senate.
And your husband flew on Jeffrey Epstein's plane 17 to 26 times, correct?
He made several trips with different legs on the trip, as I recall.
But he flew on Jeffrey Epstein's plane
Yes, he
17 to
did.
26 times.
Mhm.
Were you aware that Secret Service was dropped on some of those flights?
That is not my understanding.
Or they were not on some of those flights?
That is not my
So
understanding.
your understanding is that Secret Service was on all of the flights that President Clinton was on?
That is my
Epstein?
understanding.
By this standard of behavior, multiple credible accusers, including Juanita Broderick, who alleged rape against your husband. Your husband was disbarred in Arkansas, lost his law license before the Supreme Court, flew on Epstein's plane dozens of times, visited Epstein's island.
That is not true. That is absolutely untrue.
Well, there's documentation in the DOJ files. I'm not sure you're aware, your attorneys have told you, but Jeffrey Epstein told one of the victims to lie to investigators, to lie that Bill Clinton was ever on Epstein Island. I can provide that document to you.
We would like that document. Please.
Yeah,
Okay,
counsel,
I can
because
do
actually the files say just the opposite. Epstein himself denied it.
These are FBI notes from an interview with a victim, and I can get you the victim number and the case number and the files. These are notes from a 302 interview.
like those. Are you going to provide those now?
I don't, that's not my line of questioning. She brought it up, but I have a
I'm
document. I can
sorry,
get to
you're
you.
making a representation as to the fact.
I didn't enter anything as an exhibit.
It's but it's factually inaccurate.
No, I can give it to you later. I can go find the document, make copies of it, and give it to you this afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Okay. By your standard of pattern of behavior, according to documents released by the Department of Justice, your husband appears in photos in swimming pools, hot tubs, aboard Jeffrey Epstein's private plane with unidentified young women. We came here today and told this committee, you told this committee that a pattern of behavior demands accountability, correct?
I said that I believe the committee should call anyone who had a substantial pattern and practice of contact with Jeffrey Epstein and his crimes before they came to light.
Does that include your husband?
And after they came to light. You're going to have a chance to question him tomorrow.
So I'll ask you again, by the standard you just set in your own words just now, does this standard apply equally to your husband or only President Trump?
I have said that my husband has been subpoenaed. He will appear. He will answer your questions to the best of his ability, but there is no evidence whatsoever of any connection with Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. And I think that that will be obviously apparent in the questioning.
What makes you so sure of that then? I mean, he's photographed with,
Objection
No,
is to speculate on something that's not.
Yeah, it is so speculative. I mean, swimming in a pool, sitting in a hot tub, there are millions of people who do that without any improper behavior or certainly committing any crimes. So I
do you think most of
uh,
the men are like your husband that did anything wrong? Why were they being surrounded by young women, giving them massages on Jeffrey's private estate or private plane? Are they all innocent then?
you know,
Just
you are
because-
making assumptions in your questions that have not been proven and I don't believe are provable.
Okay, why did you wait 6 months to have this hearing today, or have this testimony?
You know, I've answered that. I thought that given the way that other witnesses who were subpoenaed at the same time were being treated, that there was an unfair treatment of both my husband and myself. And I thought that, especially from my perspective, I had very little, if any, information to provide you, and that I could have done it in a sworn statement and you could have moved on to depose somebody else who might have more information that would be beneficial to your
I have two more questions, then we're going to pass it to Congresswoman Luna. After Jeffrey Epstein was convicted, did it concern you at all that you had taken a substantial amount of money from Jeffrey Epstein?
That's an inappropriate assumption. I did not take a substantial amount of money from Jeffrey Epstein. So far as I know, Jeffrey Epstein contributed to the joint committee that was supporting my Senate race.
Which was how much?
I believe I was told $20,000.
You don't consider $20,000 substantial?
I do not consider it relevant to me because I had no recollection that I ever knew that he gave any money. To
So
the
you
joint
didn't talk to
committee.
your donors, they gave $20,000 to your campaign?
My understanding of the rules back then is that there was no coordination between the committee and the campaign. So no, I have no recollection.
But that doesn't
of
mean
doing
you
that.
can't speak to your donors. That doesn't prohibit, the law does not prohibit you speaking to
But
donors.
I didn't know he was a donor. As far as I knew, he was not a donor until I learned this in
Did it
preparation
concern you at
for
all
the
that Billy
testimony.
Maxwell was heavily involved with people you knew and were close to?
I knew people that I knew her. Yes, that's true.
And you just shrugged, you didn't want to look into it or?
Yeah,
have any
nobody,
question about it?
until her crimes were revealed and she was indicted and tried and convicted, I don't think people knew very much about at all.
And
what
then
she
how do
was
you know
doing.
Howard Lutnick?
I know Howard Lutnick because when I was senator on 9/11, the firm he headed, Cantor Fitzgerald, suffered the greatest loss of life. As I recall, something like 650 of his employees were murdered by terrorists that day. Howard Lutnick missed being a victim because he was delayed dropping
know
his
that.
child
Yes,
off to
yeah.
kindergarten. You asked the question, I'm gonna answer your question.
Now you're gonna.
This was what I spent
You're
my
going to yell at
time
me.
doing.
I'm a
I
survivor
spent
trying to look out for other
Well,
survivors trying to.
And
get
I
them.
was taking care of
Waited
the
6
people
months
who
to
lost
get here today.
3,000
6 months,
lives.
And now you're being
at World
defiant
Trade
and
Center.
indignant today.
You asked me
I have
about
met
Howard
with
Lutnick.
Epstein survivors. I'm a survivor myself. You have emails. You denied that Jeffrey Epstein, that you tried to get Jeffrey Epstein to give money to you.
I did
but
not.
Howard Lutnick was.
If you
used
have
to
an
get
email
money.
with me asking Jeffrey
I
Epstein
have
for
an
money,
email from Howard Lutnick sending it to Jeffrey Epstein and his people to raise money
I
for
don't
you
know
for
about.
an event, an intimate event for you at his offices
Well,
at Cantor Fitzgerald. You're
look,
going to sit here today
if you would let me finish.
obfuscate and say to this committee, you didn't try to get money from Jeffrey
I
Epstein. When
I
there was an
didn't.
intimate event in an email that Howard Lutnick emailed to Epstein's people and Epstein to get him to come to your intimate event at Cantor Fitzgerald, a very small event. And so I'm not going to public. You want to yell at me? That's fine, but I'll yell right back.
Well,
okay? I am looking out for
it's
survivors.
very-
I'm doing the job that you would not do and refuse to do as Secretary of State. Thank you, and I yield back. to
No,
Congresswoman.
I'm going to finish answering the question, which I have a right to do. I am very sympathetic to your personal situation. I have read about it. I have seen you testify or speak on the floor about it. And I very much sympathize with not only what you went through, but appreciate your effort to stand up for survivors. I was a senator representing the people who were murdered on 9/11. Nobody lost more people than Howard Lutnick. You can say whatever you want. You can call him and have him appear before the committee. But I knew him as the man who lost the employees that he knew intimately, including his brother.
And he was.
So I worked.
Let her finish your answer, please. Let her finish your
You
answer.
know what? If you don't want to hear what emotionally affected me, that's fine. But that's why I know Howard Lutnick. I went to the memorial service every 9/11 after the formal service was
I
held.
see what you're
with
doing here.
all-
You're
with
obfuscating
all
from
of his
questions. He's the
people, the
go-between between
families.
You and Jeffrey Epstein raising money.
Well, you know, Howard Lutnick and I did work
Thank you. I will
together
now use
because
you,
we had a lot of
Congresswoman.
victims
Thank you.
to take care of, and we worked together to rebuild downtown Manhattan. That is how I know Howard Lutnick.
Why don't you, let me get over here.
Fine, I'll do the heavy lifting.
You get like,
And I go.
Ms. Luna, Ms. Luna.
Secretary Clinton, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
President Clinton has stated that he severed ties with Epstein around 2005, prior to 2008 conviction. Were you involved or informed of any communication, emails, calls, or meetings related to distancing the foundation and or your family after those 2008 convictions?
I was not.
You had mentioned that this committee had avoided calling people to testify who should be sitting here. I would like to show you some emails. If the staff could please pass out to the members and the secretary EFTA 00878421 and EFTA 007058660, please, so she can see it.
This would be exhibit 14 and 15 for the majority.
Oh, wait, so you can see them. Thank you.
Yes, we want. There's two, are there two separate? Yes. Thank you. And I'm gonna pass them down because I have more from them. Oh. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. There's two different documents.
There are two emails, both different EFTAs. Secretary Clinton, would you please read EFTA 007058660? Just, you don't have to read from, it's to Jeffrey Epstein, but can you read the context of these?
So could you say the number again? Is the number at the
Yes,
bottom?
it's at the bottom. It's EFTA 007058660.
This is majority 14.
14, yes, sir.
Thank you for a fun night. Your littlest girl was a little naughty.
How does that make you feel?
Makes me sick.
If you can also read the EFTA 008788421. This is also another email. Can you just please provide the context? It's an email to Jeffrey Epstein. If you could just read the context of what it is.
Of course, the Ohio Jesus, and Cummings trick.
And just the main body of the context of the email.
Said that she felt God's presence next to her when she was in bed. She knows that Jesus watches over her and he helped save her life. Whoops.
How does that make you feel?
It's bizarre. I don't know what it means.
The reason I asked you to read both of these is because these emails were both sent by co-conspirators that were then given the plea deals and now have been given victim status. Both of these women were also named in an FBI document, and they're on a number of other emails. Do you believe that the Department of Justice should reevaluate the plea deals for some of these women, given that, as you can see, they have clearly done some things probably that they shouldn't have?
I don't know the status of whether that would be legally possible, so I have no opinion.
I think outside of the statute of limitations, they might be able to reinvestigate under the civil rights violations. Would you be in favor of that, or looking into any of the co-conspirators that were given plea deals down to victim status if there's credible evidence that they were trafficking young girls?
I think it should be pursued.
I'd like to also show you another EFTA. If the staff can also pass this to the secretary. It's EFTA 016562217.
So the exhibit 16 for the majority.
And I'd also like to reflect on those previous EFTAs. The EFTA 007058660, that was actually sent by a woman by the name of Susan Hamlin. And then the other EFTA 0087841 was sent by a woman named Nadia, who's also listed in other files as well.
Is it single pages? Oh, sorry.
Secretary Clinton, this was actually out of an FBI briefing document when Epstein was in his New York trial. If you can look at the top left, the individual photo, who is that individual?
I can't tell. It's such a small, blurry picture.
Okay. For those that want to pull up the file, the photos of Jeffrey Epstein, this is actually a passport that was given. The individual's name is Marcus Robert Fortinelli. Do you think that this is a sign or a telltale sign of intelligence operations and pseudonyms?
I can't speculate. I don't know.
Okay. Victims have stated to this committee, both Democrats and Republicans, that during Epstein's time, during his day camp jail is what I'll call it, that he was also in active communication with Bush's CIA director. They also had stated that he had active ties to Russia, Israel, and Iran. Given your status, not just as the First Lady, but also in your secretary position, have you ever been targeted by any of these countries as a means of a foreign intelligence gathering operation? Are you aware of potential vulnerabilities?
Yeah, I was targeted by Russia in the 2016 campaign. I mean, I think that's pretty well known.
What about Israel or Iran?
I don't know about either Israel or Iran.
Okay, do you believe that Epstein was running potentially a honeypot operation with intelligence gathering operations to collect information on high-profile individuals, both Democrat and Republican, in the United States, in an effort to sway our foreign policies? Is it possible?
I have no direct knowledge, but I think it's one of the areas your committee should investigate.
Do you think it's possible?
Well, it's certainly possible. It's a tried and true technique of certain intelligence agencies.
Do you believe that he was using honeypots in an effort to?
I can't speculate. I don't know.
Okay, and on the topic of transparency, Secretary, were you ever denied access, or did you ever inquire on the topic of UAP or Gilgamesh in your official or personal capacity, and why?
I was never denied access because I never asked for access.
Okay. In the efforts of having a transparent government and restoring faith within our country, do you believe that the American people deserve access to those topics?
I do, subject to any national security implications. I think the information should be made available. I think that's been ordered, or at least I read that it had been ordered.
And lastly, before I yield my time, Chairman Comer, do you believe that you were personally a target of an intelligence gathering operation specifically pertaining to Ghislaine Maxwell or Jeffrey Epstein?
I have no reason to believe that. I don't have any information.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. You have time.
Thank you. Representative Fowler,
Hi, could you identify yourself?
Yes, sir, sure. Pat Fallon, 4th District of
Pat
Texas,
Fallon, okay.
native of Massachusetts, but no one would vote for me there. I moved to Texas. I'm a pretty simple guy. I just want to keep things simple and just ask you some questions, give you a chance to respond. So July 25th, unanimous oversight subcommittee voted to subpoena yourself and your husband. On the 25th of August, Chairman Comer issued a lawful subpoena, which I would think it's fair to say you didn't cooperate. There was a lot of delays. It was August, we're now in February. The deposition was set in December, then it was delayed and moved to January, and now here we are in February. We all get accused of things. The higher you go up on the ladder, the more people are accusing things. If I don't have anything to hide, I'm eager to come in and testify. I just find that interesting. Why the delay for 6 months?
Well, I think, as I've said, we negotiated in good faith, and I believe the committee negotiated in good faith for a while because we thought, at least I'll speak for myself, that I could provide whatever information I had, which was not much, in the same form that you accepted it from former attorneys general and FBI directors who had much more direct knowledge, or could have had much more direct knowledge about the investigation you were conducting. And I found it bewildering that I couldn't provide what I knew in writing under penalty of perjury, as others have done.
I'd say better late than never, so I'm glad you are here. On the in September 22, ABC program The View had you as a guest, and you were quoted as saying, "No one is above the law." Still agree with that?
I agree with that.
As do I. I think Secretary Clinton, that's why.
I absolutely agree with that.
When did you first meet Jeffrey Epstein?
I never met Jeffrey.
Okay. When did you first meet Giselle Maxwell?
I have no recollection of when I first
met. So you might have met her, but you don't remember.
I do not.
Okay. So you'd obviously describe your relationship as pretty much non-existent with both.
Yeah, I had at least a casual acquaintance with her. I had nothing with him.
Okay. Would you describe your husband's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein as limited, cordial, close?
Limited for a limited period of time with respect to using his airplane.
Okay. And how about your husband's relationship with Ms. Maxwell?
I think that they knew each other for a longer period of time.
Okay. So just for the record, in 1992, Epstein donated a grand to your husband's presidential campaign. In 93, 10 grand to the White House Historical Association while you were in the White House and your husband were. And then he visited the White House as we've said, I think ad nauseum 17 times from 93 to 95. And then in 99, $20,000 donation to Senate campaign or an affiliate allied campaign. And then in 2006, 25 grand to the Clinton Foundation. And then post Clinton presidency, your husband was on the plane somewhere in the neighborhood of 26 times. Right?
I can't vouch for everything you just said. I can't vouch for.
All right, but you're not disputing it vehemently. So
no, I'm not accepting it, but okay. I can't vouch for it. I can't respond to it.
In 2008, Jeffrey Epstein was convicted of 2 felony counts. Correct?
Were they felonies? I don't recall.
They were federal felonies, yeah.
Were they felonies?
For state felonies.
State felonies, okay.
Felonies nonetheless. Okay. So just bear with me on this because, you know, again, give you a chance to respond. Your husband ran for governor 5 times. The last time in 90 or 86, I think he got almost 500,000 votes. In 92, he got 45 million votes, 47 million in 96. When you ran in 08, you got nearly 20 million in the primary. And he was governor, you were senator, secretary of state, he was president. You've met hundreds of thousands of people, probably way more than the average typical person would. And my point here is all these millions of people that supported you and your husband, hundreds of thousands that you met. In 2010, one of the most significant events of your life is going to be your only daughter's wedding. You have 500 wedding guests from all reports. That means that there's a groom involved, so you're just going down to 250. Only 250 people can attend. And it's your testimony that how did Ms. Maxwell end up at the wedding?
She was the guest of Ted Waite, who was a longtime friend of our family.
So it was just an odd coincidence that she was at one of the most. No, I mean that's fine. If that's your testimony. That's your testimony.
I was not telling my dates who their guests could, or my guests who their dates.
It's just an odd coincidence. Okay. See, would you describe your husband as a smart guy?
Excuse me, are you asking her to testify about her husband?
No.
Instead of, because he's going to be here tomorrow, so you can ask questions to the witness that is for her, but it seems to me that you are asking questions that are requiring opinion. Can you ask a question that is?
How long have you been married? Can I ask that?
Oh, do I have to answer that? 50 years.
He's a pretty smart guy by all accounts. Would you agree with that? Highly intelligent. I think he is. I didn't vote for him, but I think he is.
I will.
We're going to agree on that. I mean, I don't think that's controversial, Counselor, because everybody that I've ever met that has met your husband and has firsthand experience describes him as the smartest guy in the room when you're in the room. Very smart, scary recall. Like if you meet you 20 years later and you remember what you wore, what they were saying, which is a great tool and asset when you're a politician. I don't think that's so. With this great recall, I'm sure it's a long political career. So, I just find it surprising that in January 26th, you all sent a joint letter from you and him where he asserted that he, quote, didn't recall encountering Mr. Epstein or any specific interactions with him while in office.
What?
That was his recollection.
Okay. But even though we've established that he was in the White House, Epstein, I'm talking about 17 times, and there's a public report that there were personal tours given, not only the White House, but even the residence. And somebody that smart just happened not to remember any of it.
This witness can answer questions about her own declaration, about what she recalls or knew. Again, the president is going to be here tomorrow.
All right. Well, your client talked about patterns in practice. And Bill Clinton, her husband, said that he doesn't remember meeting Epstein during his time in office. Took trips with him, or took trips on his plane to New York, England, Japan, China, Singapore, Bangkok, Brunei, Rwanda, Mozambique, South Africa, France, Norway, and many more. So it's really not a question of where they went together, but where they didn't go together. Do you know the colloquial name for Little St. James Island?
No.
It's Epstein Island. Okay, I'll refer to it in both contexts. To your knowledge, did your husband ever visit Little St. James Island?
Not to my knowledge.
Do you know who Doug Band is?
He worked for my husband, yes.
So by reports on the press, he was a key architect of the Bill Clinton post-presidency, a top aide, the body man, the fixer, counselor, and close advisor. Would you disagree with anything else?
He worked for him in a number of capacities.
About 10 years, 02 to 12, I think it was.
He worked for him. I don't know. I can't say that.
Give or take a decade.
Mm.
Okay. He's on the record as asserting that Mr. Clinton did indeed visit Epstein Island. Do you think he's lying?
Yes.
Okay, why would he lie?
I don't know. You'd have to ask him.
Okay. And then, Virginia, when you're to Virginia, I'm sure you didn't meet her, but have you heard of Virginia Giuffre?
I've heard about her.
She was she was a victim of Epstein tragedy, but she didn't survive. She's no longer with us. She testified under oath that she saw Mr. Clinton on Epstein Island 2 separate occasions. You think she's lying? Or at least
I have no information whatsoever that he was ever on the
island. Just trying to be fair. Why do you think that is? I mean, that's my question.
I'm not going to offer opinions. I don't have any information.
Further to your point earlier about practices and patterns, now there's a third person, Steve Scully. Have you ever heard of him?
Who?
Steve Scully.
Steve Scully?
Yes.
I know of a Steve Scully who was at Apple.
He was an IT contractor on the infamous aforementioned island. He also asserts he saw Mr. Clinton, and this is a quote from him, lounging around the porch area of Little St. James Villa. It's just oddly specific. Do you think this third person was lying as well?
I don't know information about
You
Mr.
see how that
Scully.
would, I wanted to ask you that because I find that odd. It's a pattern of practice, as you mentioned. Have you ever visited Epstein Island or Little St. James?
No,
Okay, so just to be clear, is your testimony that, for instance, you never flew in a private plane, flew into St. Thomas Airport, and then didn't enter the terminal, but instead boarded a helicopter to Little St. James Island? You never did that?
I did not.
Okay. So Virginia Giuffre, who we just talked about, who we all found highly credible, I think, bipartisan, but in a bipartisan manner, stated that Mr. Clinton walked in a Vanity Fair and threatened them, and that they better not write an expose detailing the crimes of, quote, his good friend Jeffrey Epstein. Do you find that troubling?
I find it not believable.
Let's turn to the current administration president, because you said some pretty choice words of the administration and President Trump, aggressive and even some coupled with incendiary claims about President Trump and his DOJ. It's fair to say that you would not describe them as transparent?
I would not describe him as transparent.
Okay. How about you were an enthusiastic supporter of Joe Biden and Vice President Harris when each of them respectively ran for president?
I was.
Okay. Would you describe the Biden-Harris administration as an administration that was committed to transparency?
To the best of their ability.
Okay. You also asserted, and if I get this wrong, please let me know, that, or at least insinuated that President Trump is closer to Epstein than your husband. Socially.
I think there's an enormous amount of evidence that goes back many, many years demonstrating their relationship.
Do you know how many times Jeffrey Epstein visited the Trump 45 White House?
I do not know.
By all accounts and evidence, zero. And how many times did he visit the Clinton White House?
I don't know.
It was 17 times. How much did Jeffrey Epstein ever donate to Donald Trump politically?
I have no idea.
It was zero. But we have established that he donated to either you or your husband or your committee's 21 grand. Not agree?
I have no information that is personally based about their relationship.
Jeffrey Epstein donated $35,000 to foundations. One was a $10,000 donation to the White House Historical Society in '93 when the Clintons, your family, was in the White House. He donated, and then there was that 2006 donation for 25, or 2006 donation to the Clinton Foundation. He's donated similar to the Trump White House, never, no foundations either. How many pages of the Epstein files were released by the Oversight Committee in 2021 to 23 when the Democrats were in the majority?
I have no idea.
It was zero.
But there was also an ongoing investigation of, I believe, Ghislaine Maxwell during that time period.
So the answer is, I can share with you, zero. How many pages did the Biden Department of Justice release from the Epstein files from 21 to 25?
I have no personal information. I have read that because of the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, that was not done, but I have no personal information.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was zero, and that ended quite a little video now. There were no images and there were no videos. When you compare the GOP Oversight Committee, when we took over in January 23 to present, there were 65,000 documents that had been released. And then how many videos? There was nothing under the Biden administration. There was no images as well. There's been 180,000 images, 2,000 videos, and now over 3 million pages. So when you compare them, it's an odd definition of who's transparent and who isn't. Last thing, we have established that there's a $20,000 donation that Jeffrey Epstein made to an affiliated allied campaign to get you elected to the presidency. Have you returned that or donated that once, like he got convicted in 2008 of 2 felony counts? Have you ever returned that $20,000?
Didn't come to my campaign. I
I was not.
So you've never donated that to charity, that's one.
I've donated many,
It'd be good
many,
to
hundreds
donate
of
it perhaps
thousands
to.
of dollars.
I'd like to know the facts in the record that shows that Jeffrey Epstein is donated to her presidential campaign.
No,
No,
sorry,
it's,
Senate
the-
campaign, I think.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
He was
And not, yeah,
president.
Oh,
1998 was the Senate, you're right, state correction. Yeah, I think that would be a nice gesture. I yield.
Next up, Representative Cloud from Texas.
Let me go ahead and stop it here. That's about an hour's worth. I'll have to record some more tomorrow. What is tomorrow? Thursday. So I'll try to get the last 2 hours this week, and then maybe we'll go on to Bill Clinton just to kind of see how their stories mesh and how they contradict. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, you see she's more forthcoming with the Democrat of the minority members versus how she is with the Republican of the majority members. But anyway, I will talk to y'all later. Y'all have a good afternoon. See y'all. Bye.